I do think we'll move to a world where all data is on chain. Maybe there'll be some data that is off chain, but it'll be anchored in some way on chain. I was basically like trading for myself personally and going to events almost every single night that I could while working at Barclays in San Francisco. So I was fully immersed in crypto before I made the jump full time. I mean, I've seen so many people get lost in the greed and the power and the money and it's sad. And I think that that's actually that possibility lives inside every single one of us, and you have to learn how to control it in yourself.
Welcome to Beneath the Layers by Offchain Labs. My name is Hunter, and today we're speaking with Tegan Kline, CEO and co-founder of 𝗗𝗜𝗦𝗧𝗟𝗔𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗥. In this episode, we'll be speaking about Tegan's passion for giving back to the community via volunteer work, her experience being an entrepreneur just in general, and of course, how the graph has fulfilled the need for on-chain indexing. Without further ado, let's jump into it. All right, Tegan, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
Doing wonderful. I appreciate you for coming on today. I think, usually the way we start off, these episodes, is I'll ask someone about kind of, kind of a random question about, like where they're from or like something in particular. I want to start a little bit different, just because you have a really cool background, actually. I was doing a little some of my research. I do want to ask actually where you're from, but also, if you want to get into it after that, like a history of kind of like your history of giving back to the public in your form of volunteering. I found that really cool about yourself when I was researching you, but go ahead, where you're from and a little background on your volunteering.
Absolutely. Totally, yeah. No one's actually ever asked me that, so I appreciate it. I'm originally from a really small town in Ohio, and I really appreciated that upbringing, but I always knew from a very young age that I wanted to venture out of Ohio, go to a big city, and really try and, make a positive change in the world and also make something of myself. And so from a really young age, I was always thinking about being very, very well-rounded. I always wanted to give back. I was big into just helping people across the world that need help, kind of in impoverished areas. And I also had a big interest in kind of nature and animals. And so I would volunteer I think it was every Sunday or every Saturday when I was in high school, basically as soon as I could drive. I was volunteering for, I think it was called Nature. No, what was it called? I forget the animal shelter, but there was this animal shelter, and I would go every weekend, and I would change the animals' cages. I would clean it, and I would feed them. And there was things from like owls and eagles, but also the squirrels. And I have PTSD, I think, from the squirrels because they were always so angry having to live in those cages, of course, but they needed rehabilitation and that's why they were there. But they have really sharp teeth, like razors, and they would always just stare at me while I was cleaning their cages. And I would have to wear these gloves that were so thick in case they bit me. Thankfully, no one ever did, but yeah, it was definitely an interesting adventure. And then also I volunteered kind of cleaning up brush and trash in nature, so that was a great experience as well. And then in college I kind of continued in New York City. A lot of soup kitchens and things like that need help, so I would volunteer there as well.
That's great. And it's you mentioned a couple of those things that you did, like some of them related to like nature, animals, and then of course more towards like the I guess the like the more towards the public, I guess, after the when you went to college. Like was there like what in particular do you think just kind of like drove you to do a lot of that stuff? Because for what it's worth, like don't get me wrong, I think we all have it in ourselves that we want to give back to some extent. But like I think very few of us will actually say, actually literally go out and do something about it. You know what I mean?
Really, I think part of it was just how I was raised. We were always thinking about other people and, our environment and animals and things like that. So I think that was
No.
part of it. But also, I also think pragmatically as well, I knew I would be at a disadvantage for colleges kind of coming from a small town in Ohio, an unknown school. So part of it was to kind of build my resume, but that doesn't really explain I think I did over 1,000 hours of volunteering, which is a bit excessive. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of give back. I think also I was always seeking my passion in life. And
Uh,
I think because I hadn't found it yet, I really spent a lot of time soul searching and seeing to like trying to do what I can to make the world a better place. That was always kind of my meaning in life. And I'm grateful that now with crypto, I'm able to kind of do that in a way that also is kind of like work in a way.
Totally. No, yeah. It's a great point because I mean, like, you know, there are plenty of industries that you can like that like ones that like you see who you're giving back to directly from volunteer work is like mostly that. But then of course you have like other industries like crypto is definitely one of them that like like the like what society like this the benefit to society out of crypto like I think it's not as clear like today, but I feel like we're building towards that moment where it's like we're really going to be empowering people with the technology that we're building today, which it's cool. So it's like it's really
Totally.
ingrained in you through everything that you do. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and I think there is, to your point, there's a very far distance to go, but I also feel like in both of our work and our protocols, I'm sure you've seen it firsthand, the impact we're having on people around the world. I remember when we launched the Graph Network, and before that, we had a bunch of different programs, and there were people from everywhere, all across the world, that had never really participated in anything like this, and new to crypto, new to kind of being in this ecosystem where we're changing incentives and coordination. And I know we've made a very positive impact on a lot of people's lives. And it's crazy to watch, what a team of 14 initially launched now span tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people around the world. It's pretty remarkable. And I'm excited to keep growing that community.
The whole beginning is of feeding squirrels. It's crazy.
Yes.
um, um, so then I feel like I know the answer to this, but like, so you go from doing a lot of this public good stuff, volunteer work, um, I guess into like the banking industry. And did you kind of go with the same mindset, or like what was your thought process behind that?
Yeah, so I got a full scholarship to a school in New York City, and I'm really grateful for that because I think without that I wouldn't have been able to afford going to an Ivy League around the world. And I really wanted to go to New York. So I landed at Baruch College, and Baruch, the choices are really finance or accounting. And though finance is built on accounting, I am definitely not an accountant. It's not my personality. And so I chose finance. And then I was kind of like, okay, kind of similar mindset of, just having that grit, that drive. And I was like, what's at the top of finance from college? And so the answer was really, there's asset management, there's wealth management, but really like the top of finance is investment banking. And then you do your 2 year stint in banking and you go to private equity or a hedge fund or maybe a venture capitalist firm. But you really should get those 2 years at a minimum in at an investment bank. And then the banks, there's bulge brackets, there's like middle tier banks, which are called boutique banks. And oftentimes at a boutique bank, you have to work so much harder than at a bulge bracket and you have less name recognition. But the bulge brackets, that's like the Goldman Sachs, the Bank of America's, the Barclays. They really don't recruit from Baruch College. Like no one would recruit from Baruch at that time. They're more interested in bringing in Ivy League students, which makes sense, right? Like as an Ivy League student, you usually have a decent network. You're used to that kind of clientele that an investment bank has. So I had to work really hard to get into investment banking at a bulge bracket. I probably did around 400 informational interviews with different bankers at every tier of the bank to break in. And ultimately, I did get an offer at Bank of America in the financial institutions group. But it was horrific. I absolutely hated it. I didn't feel like I was making a positive change in the world. So there was a lot. I would wake up some mornings just like, why am I even living? Because I was spending, 90 to 100 hours a week at the bank. But looking back, I'm really grateful for that experience because I feel like once you go through that, you can do anything. Like people complain about startups. I'm like, this is nothing compared to what I had to live through in, half a decade in investment banking. So yeah, I more or less fell into banking and then from there I joined sales and trading to kind of check out a different flavor of investment banking and spent half a decade on Wall Street before jumping into crypto full time.
Do you feel, I guess, that like other sectors of that same field, or other sectors of finance, and some could argue that crypto is, you could argue, is like technically a sector of finance, um, did align with those values?
No, I don't think so. I think that, banking, it revolves a lot around money and just making as much money as possible for
Yeah.
yourself, for the bank. And that's really kind of the main impetus of banking, I would say. Some people were very passionate about finance and they were great at it. But I think ultimately everything revolved around money. And that didn't feel kind of aligned with my values. I think money is kind of a means to an end. And once you have a certain amount and you reach that post-economic state, you kind of search for more. You search for more meaning. At least, I definitely did and do. And so, no. And then, the investment banks, they're also kind of this middleman that's a bit of a rent seeker, if you will. They get paid a lot of money to be in the middle of transactions. So, taking a company public, doing a merger and acquisition, all of that can happen in crypto without a middleman. And so, well, I shouldn't say it's very different, obviously, in crypto, but so crypto makes it much more efficient. And then also the other thing I learned from being on the inside of an investment bank, and this was more during my time in sales and trading, was that trade settled T+2. So that takes 2 days to settle the trade for, be it a bond or, a stock to get in the hands of whoever's purchasing it. And so that is just very inefficient. And then things also break downstream. So sometimes it's not a T+2 settle. It ends up being a T+5 settle. People are calling it, where's my bond? Or, I haven't received the cash yet. And so you have to go to the middle office or back office sometimes to fix whatever broke downstream. So I think a lot of these banks are prime for new tech. And, what better than DeFi and crypto to make it much more efficient. And I think you always will want some person in the middle when you're moving big money, especially if you're playing with leverage or margin. You want someone to call you and be like, hey, you're about to get margin called. So I think people will always pay for those services on top, but might as well use more efficient tech.
Gotcha. Okay. So do you think that was kind of like it? Like it's kind of like let's like there's definitely a world where all this stuff is more efficient and maybe like the amount of money that's spent on these middlemen can kind of be redistributed back to the parties, the main parties that are involved. Do you think that was kind of what brought you to crypto then, or I mean maybe a mix of what it was?
I think it was definitely a mix. So I learned about Bitcoin in 2011, and I didn't understand enough about monetary policy and the Federal Reserve. I mean, at that time, I hardly understood the financial crisis because we were so sheltered. I lived on the railroad, it was a very stable life, very, middle class, lower middle class life, but I didn't feel the effects of the financial crisis as much. And so I learned about all of that in finance. But then in finance, like when you study finance or finance, when you study
Yeah.
finance, they teach you that quantitative easing is a positive thing, and the Federal Reserve, what they're doing, it's a positive thing for the economy. So I hadn't kind of gone deep on that path yet, like I have today. And so it was really with Ethereum that I dove into crypto head first. And I saw the opportunity to create a new financial system, having worked in the legacy financial system, but also expand what Bitcoin did for money to almost every asset class that exists in the world. And so for me, that was it. I was obsessed with crypto. Yeah. And I was basically like trading for myself personally and going to events almost every single night that I could while working at Barclays in San Francisco. So I was fully immersed in crypto before I made the jump full time.
That's cool. And can I say was this around like 2016, 2017, or am I off?
2016 was when I learned about Ethereum, and then I made the jump full time
Yeah.
2 years later in 2018.
Okay, okay. Because I
Yes.
was gonna say like
Feels like
that
forever
timeline.
ago.
Yeah. No, think about it. That was 2016 was literally 8 years ago. Nuts. Mind blown. That's
It's
crazy.
crazy. And it feels like so much longer in crypto years. It's like 3 decades or something.
Yeah, I'm like literally losing hair ever since going full time.
Right? I know. I'm surprised I'm not gray yet. Soon.
Oh man. Well, because I myself joining crypto and say I learned about it in 2017, definitely. And
Okay,
it's
nice.
funny because like at that time there were a lot of projects that were like kind of like a lot of ones that really felt like really were really like on the
Tezos.
cutting edge. Tezos, you had the Braves, you had and of course we'll talk about it now. We had the Orchids. I remember that, like
Uh-huh.
decentralized
Yeah,
VPN. That was like, yeah, it's like stuff like that that like it's like so obvious, but like crypto is the only type of technology that can solve it, you know? Uh,
totally.
yeah. So how'd you like? Okay, so you got introduced there. It sounds like 2018. You found out about Orchid, and you kind of, and you know, it got involved there. Like, how did that happen? I'm curious.
Totally, yeah. So I actually joined another startup before joining Orchid.
Okay.
I was offered a role. I was volunteering for Crypto Underground, actually, which I still lead in San Francisco. And I met a really good friend there. And so I received a job offer just kind of from networking at that event. And I joined that startup, and that startup actually knew Seven Waterhouse, my CEO at Orchid. And I was there for only 3 months. I kind of made the decision after 3 months. I mean, looking back, it's wild. I didn't understand crypto as much as I do today. You know, Hyperledger, selling equity, all of the things I wouldn't really build on or do today just because I'm kind of this decentralization, censorship resistant maximalist today. Um, and no shade to anyone building on Hyperledger. But so I left after 3 months, and I think that this is a really big key to who I am as a person and kind of how I've been able to climb up the ranks because I make decisions pretty quickly. You know, I do my due diligence, but I make decisions fast. But then I also, you know, iterate. And if I made the wrong decision, I make a move pretty quickly. And I feel like a lot of people, you know, they're still on Wall Street. A lot of my friends from Wall Street, and they're like, "Should I get into crypto?" I'm like, "It's been 8 years, my dude. Like, yeah, you need to." But they're like still contemplating it. It could because they want to make that perfect move the first time. And I don't think that's how you should think about it. I think, you know, life is a journey and you're going to hit bumps in the road, and that's okay as long as you know, don't stick somewhere that you don't really believe in, as long as you shift and change. So anyway, and then I was at an event. So it's actually funny how I learned about Orchid. I was going to an invite only investor event in San Francisco. I was getting ready for that event, and I was listening to Laura Shin's, I think unconfirmed at that time. It's called Unchained Today, her podcast. And she was at Oslo Freedom Forum, and Seven Waterhouse spoke at that event. And so I'm listening to this podcast. I'm hearing about the mission behind Orchid and getting everyone equal access to the internet. And I go to this invite only event, having, you know, just finished that podcast, and Seven Waterhouse is presenting at that event. So I felt like that was just kind of serendipitous, if you will. And, you know, he said during that talk that he needed help with meeting people in different countries, like meeting politicians. And I know, you know, a handful of politicians across, you know, different countries. And so I went up to him afterwards and I offered to connect him. And so that's really where we initially got connected. And then once I wanted to
Wow.
kind of make a change in my career, that's when I reached out to Seven and joined Orchid.
That's incredible. And yeah, I just want to also comment on what you said earlier, like how like you know quick to make decisions and kind of realize you know like what situation makes the most sense for you based on what's currently going on. And I will say, you know, I'm totally of that same mindset. Like, I think sometimes people don't realize that sometimes it's just as risky as staying in the same situation that you're in right now versus making a change. Shout outs to your friends at Wall Street. I'm sure they're doing great, but they could have been doing better in crypto, maybe, or maybe worse. Who knows?
Totally. Much better. Much better. With more meaning. More money, more meaning.
Yeah, that's a great point, actually. Look at that. So, was it like what was it about then Orchid in particular? Then would you say was it like the decentralized VPN in particular that like really kind of caught your attention, or was it anything like anything else that they were doing?
Yeah, at that time, it was really about kind of this authoritarian world that we're entering into, this hyper surveillance state, and the need for privacy, and then the need to get everyone equal access to the internet across the world. I still think that is necessary today. At that time, we were building a private layer one, so not like an enterprise blockchain, of a layer one blockchain that you could have full anonymity and privacy on, with a decentralized VPN on top. And that really resonated, especially because across the world, there are so many people that have a very much different looking internet than we have, you know, here in America. And not that our internet's better, necessarily, but they're definitely different. And so to be able to kind of access these different regions of the world and the way that they operate online was very calling to me. And I still think that that's an incredibly important space. I think, privacy is a human right. And it's really sad to see developers going to jail to get people access to that human right, and like what we saw with Tornado Cash. I mean, it's incredibly disheartening, but there's a reason Satoshi was anonymous, right? And that's all I'll say there.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you gotta be a little careful, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
That's a good point. Exactly. Like that's probably the most important thing. And I think the crypto space is so cool because there's so much opportunity for people that truly believe in self-sovereignty, like really giving power back to the people and doing it in multiple different ways, right? You can do it like you just said, like a level of kind of decentralized access to the internet, creating infrastructure for people to build on anywhere in the world. It can be done in so many ways. Honestly, creating DeFi apps is like another amazing way too, right? Literally giving access, lending, borrowing, trading, etc., like to people that would have never had access to that before, right?
Totally. But I
That's
think this is,
incredible.
yeah, but this is why censorship resistance is so important, and decentralization. The full stack needs to be decentralized, or at least as decentralized as it can possibly be while still being efficient. But censorship resistance, I think, is the end goal, right? And I think some people in the space have kind of gotten lost in maybe the money side of crypto, and you can take shortcuts, or maybe you want ease of access. And obviously, we do need to make these protocols as easy to use as a SaaS product, but with, the censorship resistant tech underneath. And so, yeah, that's my one ask to anyone building in this space is like, don't get lost in the ease of it. Don't get lost in kind of the money side, and really kind of focus on the true values of crypto, because otherwise, what's the point of all of this if we just get, you know, shifted back to the way people built Web 2 and those monetization structures.
What would you say then, like, kind of made you want to make the jump then, I guess, maybe from Orchid, into something a little bit more, I'd say, honestly, probably maybe even a lot more infrastructure related, like the graph.
Yeah, absolutely. Orchid pivoted to building a decentralized VPN on top of Ethereum, which is a public blockchain. And so people that need that access don't necessarily have the safety in accessing it if a VPN is illegal in where they live. And so
Hmm.
I left Orchid. I had a lot of consulting offers. I think I was consulting for a handful of different crypto companies, of which the graph was one of them. I also think that, building that application on top of a blockchain at that time gave me a lot of insight to the infrastructure that's needed underneath to be able to create, this censorship resistant world. And so I wanted to kind of go to the infrastructure level and help build Web 3, because I think that at that time it was very much the most important need. I would still argue that today, the infrastructure level, we're still working on, decentralizing it. And so I do still think that's probably the most important space. But the other thing I really love about the graph is that it's blockchain agnostic, it's application agnostic. We support almost, every chain. Well, I can't say that anymore because there's crazy amounts of chains, but we support about 42 different chains across
Yeah,
the
yeah.
ecosystem, and
Oh,
entrepreneurs
wow.
that are building in this space. I know the dApp chains, I'm like mind blown, but we just need to make like an SDK so anyone can add their own chain to the graph. So coming soon.
Nice. Okay, Alpha. Okay, I like that. Would you be able to kind of like give us like an EY5 of what the graph is for maybe those who don't know, or maybe those who do know, but maybe just like don't have a good grasp of like what it is like a TLDR? It's infrastructure, but
Totally.
like what kind of infrastructure?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, kind of what Google does for the web, the graph does for blockchains and organizing data so that we can easily search that data. Now, if I'm explaining this like you're five, maybe it's you have a bunch of blocks, and that's like the blockchain. There's a bunch of data on the blockchain, and it's all chaos. It's not organized. There's blue, red, yellow, green, all
Okay.
mixed together. And so, what the graph does is it takes those blocks and it puts all the blues together, puts all the yellows together, puts all the greens together, so that you can take those blocks and you can build anything you want with it. And so that's what the developers do. They use the graph to get organized data so that they can build really amazing applications without needing to worry about organizing those blocks every time they want to build something.
It's actually a really good DI 5. Like
Thank
actually.
you. Thank you. I know sometimes I ask people to explain things like a five and they're like, I'm like, I don't even understand that at 30. So
Oh no, are you kidding me? Like trying to explain to people like what you do in crypto is like impossible. Like I just
totally,
tell people at this
totally.
point like we just build blockchain. That's it. Like
Yeah.
if you know Bitcoin, we build stuff like that.
Yeah. Love it.
So okay, so you mentioned that the graph does have a ton of support for like 40 something chains, potentially an SDK coming out for those who want to integrate it. Like I think at some point, in the graph's journey, there was some sort of migration of infrastructure, I think, onto Arbitrum One. Like what was that exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is very different than what the graph is doing on the indexing side. So the graph, as I mentioned, is agnostic. We support all of the layer twos, layer one blockchains, and we love all the L2s. But we had to make a choice in migrating the graph's coordination mechanism. So this is kind of like our protocol rules, if you will. Because when we launched the graph back in the day, there were no L2s live yet. And so we always knew that gas costs were going to be a problem for network participants when things are popping off in crypto. And so when you need to get access to blockchain data, you want to make sure that you're not paying a ton of money in gas costs when you're organizing data on the graph as indexers, that you're not paying crazy gas costs or delegating to indexers. So with that, we kind of explored all of the different layer two options, and Arbitrum kind of won the cake. It was definitely a tight decision, but ultimately, your guys' fraud proofs mechanism was the tiebreaker.
Yeah, I think it's a security. Like it's funny because it's so funny. Like, I think back in the day that maybe there was more of an emphasis on like proper it's like proving mechanisms and things to make sure that light layer twos are provably as secure as like a layer one. But I don't know. I feel like maybe with the bear cycle, the bear and the bull cycles, it's like the care for security. I feel like just kind of ebbs and flows.
Yeah,
Sometimes people care about it, sometimes they don't. But I think the ones that are truly trying to build like decentralized infrastructure, I do, like to your point. Yeah.
totally. Yeah, no, it's incredibly important regardless of the market cycle.
Do you see their like, the graph's role essentially in like 2024, 2025, where we're literally going to see hundreds of L2s, L3s most likely launching, all different stacks, all different, niches. Like you see it changing in any way? I know you mentioned something like maybe like an SDK coming out. But like, is there like, I don't know, I guess are you guys thinking about that strategy any differently than you have in the past?
Yeah, great question. So back in the day, actually, it wasn't popular to think about multi-chain. I think Cosmos was the godfather, godmother of
Yeah.
multi-chain, if you will. And then we, as the graph, made a decision very early on to go multi-chain, and we explored many different blockchains. And here we are now. Fast forward 4 or 5 years later, we support 42 different chains, and we will continue to add chains based on our belief in those chains. I think we're adding Arbitrum Nova coming very soon as well. And so yeah, we'll continue to add app chains, L3s, whatever that world ends up looking like. We'll be there to support the chains and the applications building on those different chains. And there are a handful of dApps that they'll only go on to another chain and expand to another chain if the graph support is there because they need subgraphs.
No, and you know what? Like, I think that that definitely can't be like overstated enough. I've talked to so many teams that like actually, like I think like way back when maybe there wasn't graph support for Arbitrum One, like maybe in the very beginning, like that was a good blocker for a good amount of teams because like yes, I can connect to the chain, but like I have no idea where to pull the information from. Like where it is,
Yeah,
like it's not organized.
yeah.
Right. There's definitely been more of like a trend, like to kind of put everything as much as possible as we can on chain, right? Especially with like the proliferation of like alternative DA structures and stuff like that, making things a lot cheaper to, things a lot cheaper to use. Um, do you think personally that all data should be on chain? And it's Web 2 data, Web 3 data, like whatever it may be. You can get as specific or as non-specific as you want, but like I'm curious what your take is. Like maybe what should be on chain, maybe what maybe should be left off chain,
Yeah, I
if
do
anything.
think that we'll get to a world where all data is on chain. I think we have solved scaling thanks to L2s like Arbitrum. And so with that, I do think we'll move to a world where all data is on chain. Maybe there'll be some data that is off chain, but it'll be anchored in some way on chain. And so that's what I'm really excited about, because you do want that data to be verifiable on the internet. And I do think that, the internet we use today will become the legacy web, and we will move to Web3, where the majority of data is on chain in some form or another.
No, I definitely agree. Like, I think I low key, I feel like even whether we like it or not, almost everything will be on chain. And that doesn't necessarily mean the same chain, right? Like you said, Graph supports 40 different chains right now. I have to think that there's literally over hundreds of chains in existence between L1s, L2s,
Yeah,
whatnot.
totally.
I always make the joke that like my accountant's gonna hate me. Like which would you see all the different like transactions I have across a million of chain?
Totally.
Yeah.
We'll need a new accounting structure and system. It would be nice to simplify it.
I know, right?
I don't think you should have to hire someone else to do your taxes in America. I think that's like a norm we've just accepted that really shouldn't be normal. And it would be great if we could simplify it in some way.
Dean, you're literally the first person that's ever said that. I'm like, I've literally been saying that for the longest time.
Oh
It's
my gosh,
crazy
no
that we need
way.
to
I
literally
love
go
it.
out of our way to hire someone.
Right.
It's no, right? Isn't it crazy? This thing that we
It's
need to
insane.
do, you need to hire someone for.
Totally. It's
nuts.
insane. And there's simpler models. Like other countries have much simpler models, so we should look at adopting them. What can we call it, like decentralized accounting or something?
Yeah. Why not? You kidding me? Like crowdsourcing accounting or something? Yeah, of
Right.
course. That's a great idea. So we should coin that, actually. We might need to cut this out of the podcast so no one takes the idea.
Right. Get the domain ASAP, or the ENS name. Just kidding.
Oh yeah. Okay, so clearly, Graph is like, supposed to be like this infrastructure level kind of organizational tool for the blockchain. I think is kind of the way I'm thinking about it. The other thing I noticed is that, you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, but so now that there's something called Edge and Node, and it feels like there's some sort of connection there between that and the Graph. I'd love to hear you maybe explain a little more about what Edge and Node is and how that relates to each other.
Totally, yeah. Crypto isn't confusing enough. We love to have 7 different organizations surrounding one protocol. But no, so Edge and Node, we're the initial team behind the Graph. So we created the protocol, we invented a subgraph, we gave people a way to index the blockchain and query the blockchain in a decentralized way. And so when we launched the Graph Network, the foundation technically launched the Graph Network. Edge and Node was formed, a little while before the launch of the Graph Network. And actually since then, it was a little over 3 years ago, since then, we have actually 7 different core developers across the Graph ecosystem. So Edge and Node was the first core dev. The Graph Foundation kind of shepherds and stewards all of us. They give grants. They just put out a roadmap for the Graph. 𝗗𝗟𝗡 is a core developer, so they create really great subgraphs and substreams that institutions can query. And then you also have Streaming Fast, Semiotic. They're working on different data services. So it's really amazing because we have so many different people working on so many different parts of the Graph and these different data needs. When we launched, there wasn't a ton of data needs at that time. There weren't really many applications. Because of the Graph's launch, the DeFi movement was able to take off because developers had a way to easily query the blockchain and build really great applications. And since we've seen so many other use cases, but now the crypto industry and space has evolved so much. So it's not just L2s, L3s, app chains, but also so many different use cases and data needs for each of those use cases. So we're expanding to SQL, substream SQL, AI, basically any data needs. And I'm really excited on the AI side because when you feed AI with subgraphs, one, you know where that data and information is coming from, unlike kind of the traditional web and internet today. But also it lowers the barrier to entry for those that want to get involved in crypto, leveraging, the Graph's tech. Because you can search for, any language that exists, Spanish, Mandarin, you can search and query the blockchain in that language. And so really anyone around the world can participate. And that's what I'm really excited about. I think ultimately I had to move from Ohio to a big city to get opportunity, but that's not the lay of the land anymore. You know, we hire people in India and Africa that are incredible, and the opportunity can come to you no matter where you are in the world. And I think that that's really exciting, and we really need to, leverage that by helping people kind of learn about this industry. There's a lot of misconceptions out there. I got on TikTok just to educate about crypto and Web3 because it used to only just be like,
Uh-huh.
this token's gonna moon. And it's like, you guys, there's so much more beyond just like what you see on the trading screen when it comes to crypto. And so I wanted to really educate there. And I've made so many friends since joining TikTok. So I love doing that work and kind of educating and expanding to the masses.
Oh yeah, and you know what? That's such an important thing that I think sometimes like especially the crypto audience, I think like the Web3 crypto audience kind of overlooks is content. I mean like the content, especially the platforms like TikTok and short form kind of platforms that promote short form content like that. It's so important because like that's literally how you disperse information, especially it's like the younger generation. You know.
Totally.
Just yeah, so it's good to hear that we're talking about things more than just mooning. We're talking about how it actually works and could benefit everybody. It's a good
Totally.
point.
No,
Yeah.
and I think about that too. Like when I was learning about crypto, I didn't know a lot of people in crypto. And I was able to listen to Laura
Yeah.
Shin's podcast. And she had at that time, she did a lot of kind of beginner content. She was learning the industry herself back in 2016, 2017. And I'm really grateful for that. And anyone around the world can listen to this podcast and others and access this information. I mean, ETH Denver is going on right now. You're there. I'm not, but I'm able to tune in live to ETH Denver like I am there. So yeah, don't sleep on it.
Oh yeah. I think one thing to point out there from what you said about a Janot is the importance of making sure that sorry, the importance that you guys are putting on localization. It seems like you mentioned India, Africa. Where does and again, this is coming from my research a little bit on Janot. Where does what I saw the House of Web3, where does that fit in? Is that like a physical location
Yeah.
that you guys kind of come and like brainstorm? What is that? That sounds so cool.
Great question. Yeah, so I didn't know with the graph we've always been remote and digital. We get together in person at least once a year. It used to be more often. It used to be quarterly when we were a smaller team, but now it's like putting on a wedding because it's
Yeah.
150 people across all the core devs. It's a lot. But with that, we wanted so basically when the pandemic hit, everyone was like, San Francisco's dead, we're leaving, it's horrible here. And there are a lot of things about San Francisco that need to change and improve, absolutely. But that being said, San Francisco will never die. I mean, moving to San Francisco changed the course of my life. I don't think I would have gotten into crypto if I wasn't in San Francisco physically. And so part of me wanted to give back to San Francisco, but part of me was like, San Francisco is never going to die. Maybe you're bearish on it now, but we're going to put a
Nah.
flag in the ground. It was me and even Noel, the crazy little like San Francisco pioneers. We put a stake in the ground and we said, no, we're going to double down on San Francisco while everyone's, fighting it. Because San Francisco, coming from New York, the culture is so different, right? New York is very like square. You have to be perfect. And investment banking, oh my God, like God forbid my hair's out of place. You'll get torn to shreds. In crypto and in San Francisco, you can be so weird. And when I first moved there, I'm like, this place is weird. Get me back to New York because people show up at the coffee shop in a onesie. But there's something really special and experimental about San Francisco, like unlike anywhere else I've been in the world. Maybe Berlin is a little bit more weird, but in a different way. Um, but San Francisco,
Okay.
like Brad Stevenson of Blockchain Capital said this to me, and I always think about it. He's like, nowhere else in the world can you go to a dinner party and you talk about your crazy startup idea, and people are like, how can I help? Do you need funding? Do you need, like, I know someone, are you hiring? Nowhere else, like in New York, you'll get kicked out of the dinner, like, go away, you weirdo. So I think there is something really special about San Francisco. If you have, I think a lot of the big money did move out because the taxes are insane. But still, like, it's ripe for innovation. And if you're trying to kind of make a big mark on the world, it's a great place to be. Okay, so the House of Web3, it's a co-creation space. So we found a great lease about 2.5 years ago now. And it's a 13,000 square foot building in the Presidio in San Francisco. So it's super safe. It almost feels like kind of remote to San Francisco, like downtown proper. Um, and it's really incredible. So it's a place for anyone in crypto to come to, have events or to co-create, to work from the House of Web3. And we welcome also people that are Web3 curious. We want it to be a place for them to come. And like, if you need help with your wallet, someone can help you. If you need help building a subgraph, we have people from the graph there that can help you. And so there's hundreds of co-creators that co-create from the House of Web3, but it's also become a destination for people traveling to San Francisco to, be around like minds. I think we are very much digital in the crypto space, but we hop, as you know, from city to city, continent to continent to be together in person. So yes, that's part of the crypto culture.
Yeah, and I just want to point out how perfectly that kind of matches your like you mentioned like your initial upbringing, like with your volunteer work, your kind of contribution to public goods. I kind of like you the way what you described essentially is kind of that, but like you're literally allowing the public to saying, hey, like this is the House of Web3. If you want to learn about crypto, onboard yourself. Like we're here essentially to help you kind of do it. We just to a certain extent, right? You mentioned that we'll do some go there
Totally.
and collab and whatnot as well, but it's literally like yeah, it's like a public good for people that are interested in getting involved in this really complex technology that is ripe, unfortunately, with scams, pitfalls. But if onboarded correctly, it's the best thing in the world.
Totally.
Yeah, that's
Totally. I
amazing.
love that.
So I wanna kind of start to end off with two relatively questions more specific to you, rather than the graph or anything crypto specific.
Hmm.
What do you think it takes to be an entrepreneur in 2024, just generally
Yeah, I
speaking?
mean, you have to be a little bit mad. You have to like and embrace chaos. But I also think it takes a winner's mentality. Like, you have to like to win. You have to have grit. You have to kind of not give up. And just almost look at failure like it's not an option. I also think, it does take passion. I meet so many people, they're like, I want to be an entrepreneur because I want to make a lot of money. And it's like, you're not going to be a very good entrepreneur if that's your end all be all, because everything is cyclical, and you have to have like passion at the end of the day beyond just like a desire for money, fame, power, whatever that is.
Definitely, I know 100%. And do you think I think one part of being an entrepreneur, I feel like there's in my eyes there's kind of like two kind of different pathways you can go. I mean, it first depends on who you ask. I feel like you can go kind of like doing your own route, like doing your own thing, kind of, and being like a kind of like a one person army versus like leading a
Mm-hmm.
team, like being the person that people are asking questions. I don't know. I feel like that takes a very specific personality. Like just be able to like literally just envision everything and lead people at the same time. Leading people is not easy.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like
totally. It
how has
takes,
that been for you? Like being in that
yeah, I mean, I
position?
think it just takes a lot of conviction, I think, and passion to make that
Yeah,
positive change. I definitely like, there are some days where you get down, but I think, I think at the end of the day, it's like you want to make this positive change, you want to see it through, and you're not gonna quit. You're gonna, make sure you see it through.
totally. No, 100%. My second question is I was it kind of similar to this, so I think I'm gonna tweak it a little bit. Um, what I was gonna ask you is what does it mean to be successful? But so
Hmm.
maybe you can answer this as well. But I want to ask you like, what does it mean to be happy? You know, I feel like nowadays like things are just like as time goes on, things get more complex. Everything in society gets more complex, and I find that like people like get a little more cynical. Have gotten a lot more cynical over the years. What do you think it takes to be happy in 2024? Like generally speaking, I don't know.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, you need to have meaning in your life, whatever that looks like to you. For me, that's leaving the world a better place, trying to leave every day better than I came into it. But for some people, that's family, or, you know, there's so many different meanings. Maybe it's just time to focus on your hobbies. So I think it's different for every person. There's no one size fits all, which is I think something I've learned applies to the majority of things in the world, even though we're taught in school differently, like the food pyramid. Health is such a individualized thing. There's no one size fits all. Um, yeah, but I would say to me, it's very much kind of leaving the world better than I entered it. And I think success is similar, right? It's like having that meaning and working towards it. I think some people would say success is money, power, fame, but I disagree. And I think, if you are making a positive change in the world, you're probably going to have at least one, if not all three of those things. But what I've found is that those things are so surface and you can get lost in those things. I mean, I've seen so many people get lost in the greed and the power and the money, and it's sad. And I think that that's actually, that possibility lives inside every single one of us, and you have to learn how to control it in yourself. And there are times where, I got accepted to speak at Web Summit, which is the biggest tech conference in the world. And my ego went crazy. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm amazing. Like, look at me. And then I'm like, what the heck? Who are you? I don't even recognize this version of Tegan. And like, your ego is always hungry. Like, it will never be fed. Like, Web Summit, what's next? What's higher? And it's like, that's not what you want to live for. Yes, it's important to have a little bit of ego because it keeps you going sometimes. But ultimately, like, that's not the end all be all. And if it is for you, you're going to become a pretty shit person. So I would advise against it.
Oh, yeah. You got to remember, you'll always be that girl from Ohio, no matter how successful
Yeah.
you are.
I know my brother says that. He's like, you can take the girl out of the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl. I'm like, don't talk to me.
Wow.
Midwestern vibes.
That's a good one. I like that, though.
No.
That's great. Look at that. Well, no, that's great. It's so it's very. I think it's very like very refreshing. I think to hear that, especially from like like builders, leaders in the space that because it's true. Like and like what you said there definitely makes sense. Like you definitely need to have a little bit of you need to have hunger and a little bit of ego, right? Like all of us have a little ego in us, but you gotta have just
Totally.
enough. But not enough where it's like you kind of turn into like the next Kanye. I love Kanye, man. The guy's,
Right. Oh
the guy's
God.
nuts. A little Kanye in you.
Totally.
That's it. A little
Oh
bit.
God.
Well, Tegan, I appreciate you for coming on today. It's been a great pleasure. And yeah, looking forward to collabing potentially in the future. Yeah, thank you.
Amazing. No, thank you. I'm excited to do more between Arbitrum and the graph and support the builders on Arbitrum. So thank you so much for having me on. This was a great conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of Beneath the Layers. If you're interested in listening to more, make sure to check us out on YouTube or on any of the other major podcasting platforms. Also, we're hiring. So if you're interested in working on cutting edge tech, scaling Ethereum, etc., make sure to apply at jobs.lever.co/Offchain Labs. Additionally, a disclaimer. Nothing in this podcast should be taken or understood as financial advice of any kind, and all opinions expressed by the host, myself, or the guests are solely their opinions, my opinions, and do not reflect the opinions of Offchain Labs as a company. All that being said, thank you for watching. See you guys in the next one.